Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. And we are joined by two guests today. You might have seen us on their podcast, but I'll let them introduce themselves in just a second. So today we are going to have another one of our, I was about to say infamous Smackdowns. I don't know if they are infamous. But today's battle is in-house marketers versus external marketers. We've all all four of us have all kind of done various jobs, so we're gonna have it out once and for all who's better. But first, I'll let our guests introduce themselves. So, Rob, over to you first.
Oh, no pressure. Hi, I'm Rob Boyle. I co-host with Jonny Marketing Dribble Podcast. My background, I've had 17 years in digital marketing, e-commerce, and I've worked in-house and agency, which is going to be quite useful for this debate today on both sides. And I've also worked, mentored, and managed Jonny. With at least
Johnny's like, I'm going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll get into it in my intro. So I'm Jonny Kenyon, other half of the Marketing Dribble Podcast. I can't compete with Rob's however many 17 years. So I just say I've got over a decade of experience in marketing, background in e-commerce, moving across now into B2B. Always been in house, so I'm going to definitely be taking sides in this debate. Rob was my first ever manager, so very much a self-taught marketer from the offset.
Wonderful. So I'm sure we've all had this experience working with, whether you're in-house working with agency or external, or you're external/agency working with in-house, but we just don't seem to get along that well. Like it's always an effort typically to make sure that we work together well, and we might start off well, but like cracks tend to develop. Why do you think that is?
I've got a couple of theories on this. I think the first one is I think whether you're agency or in-house, I think you both believe you're right. And this is where you, as you say, you get along, and then it's almost like kind of a relationship where then all of a sudden you both think you're right and you're not wrong, and the other person's right and they're not wrong, or whichever way around. But you both kind of get that. And I also think it also goes back to how the agency was hired in the first place. If the MD suddenly thinks there's a gap, a skill gap, or you're not good enough at your job, and this agency will come in and they're going to make big waves and do all this, I think immediately the in-house team have the backs up. And I don't think that starts the relationship well. Although at first, because of the MD, you're all smiles and yeah, come in. But they start blaming it on the agency because the performance isn't there. And that's for me where the sort of main things are.
That's
Jonny,
it,
do you have
yeah.
any
No,
thoughts on that?
100% agree. I think a big part of it probably is how they're brought in. But I think anytime you put under the microscope as a person, not even just a marketer, it's you are going to get your back up a little bit. There's no way of getting around that. So it depends on the agency entirely and their approach and why they're brought in, exactly like you've said, Rob. But from an agency perspective as well, you kind of alluded to, if things are not going well, people are going to look for a scapegoat, and it's always going to be the other person. So if you're both working together on a project, but I don't know, I suppose it's all about aligning aims and that kind of stuff, but I guess we'll get into it. So the main thing is just you're under the microscope, aren't you, both sides? And it's not a
Yeah,
nice position to be in.
I was going to pick up on that point on aligning. So typically agencies and in-house teams don't overtly align on the same KPIs and metrics. They kind of, oh, we're both doing SEO or you're doing PPC or whatever, but what the actual goals are very specifically, they're not aligned together. Or for example, an agency will use one way to measure stuff and the marketers use a different way to measure stuff. So I feel like that friction starts to happen quickly. But also some agencies, not some agencies, but just innately agencies have other priorities too, right? Like it's important that for them to keep you on a retainer and like whatever financial objectives there are and whatever team objectives there are. So there's like an extra layer of complexity on top of that, of just, actually working together, but also other incentives, I guess, for the agency, but also for the marketers, right? I can't separate those.
No, like an upsell, I guess. Like an upsell from an in-house perspective might seem like they're trying to take more of like your territory, but for an agency, it's part of their job, isn't it? And they just want to help more. So, yeah,
Do,
100%.
do you think there's a threat to jobs as well? Just looking at this internally. Do you think that? And that's why they get very defensive in house, and it's almost like you're saying, Ruta, with the KPIs and things. It's like we'll just hide this back and won't release all the information and everything you need. Just it's that protection, isn't it?
Yeah, I've absolutely felt that as an in-house marketer, that when you're working with an agency sometimes, and it's generally to be very shady, it generally tends to be the agencies that aren't very good. What they'll do is they'll try and focus on the relationship with the founder or the CEO, the person who potentially brought them in the first place, and kind of forget about the marketer. And I always see that if you're an external person coming in, your biggest advocate, the person who's going to try and keep you if the shit hits the fan, is actually the marketer, I think. And I think a lot of agencies kind of misplay that relationship between themselves and the marketer and the CEO, because they always think, oh, well, the CEO gets the final say. But actually, like you say, it should be that especially in a good marketing department, that the marketer is the one that's got their hands on the data that's going to probably, hopefully, you'd think, drive the decision as to whether you stay or go. I don't know if you guys have experienced that before, but I always see as someone going in externally that my job is to make the marketer look good.
Yeah, on the most part, like I've had really good relationships with agencies. There's one particular agency that me and Rob worked with, and I still work with them today. You know, I've brought them across to every other job, and that's the other benefit. You know, if you get those relationships, they do last. But I won't mention names, of course, but I have worked with agencies who I consider, as you've said, to be less good agencies. You know, as an in-house marketer, another point, I guess, why there's that friction is your hands are, you're spinning so many plates. There's no way you can possibly like be 100% on everything. And they kind of pick out like an area, and they might just go to the CEO and be like, oh, they're not doing this very well. Maybe we should take that, you know, as an upsell opportunity or whatever. If someone did that and they sort of like go over my head, that would just make me so, I would just be right, they're gone. Do you know what I mean? It's like, bring it to me, we'll work on it together. We're both kind of like got to work on that. And you're right, they sort of like cozy up to the CEO and like try and make that bond kind of thing. But ultimately, it's you've got the insights, as you say, as a marketer to kind of prove that wrong. But yeah,
and you can always find something to pick apart, right? Like, doesn't matter how incredible your marketing is. If I come in, I can find something to pick apart. So it's like you're always on the back foot anyway with an agency, because they're looking for things that aren't going well, and you're always going to find something. You know, like it's impossible not to.
So, with that in mind, what are some of the pros, I guess, on both sides of the argument for, you know, in-house or external? What do you think some of the good things are about? I mean, maybe potentially even about the way that the relationship works together when it is good.
So I guess from like an in-house perspective, a pro, well, especially in B2B, is, and I'm going to just really stereotype here and generalize, is that you just know that product inside out. Okay. Like, you know that product better than an external agency ever can, you know, because they're working on loads of different accounts, and they, you know, they're not having conversations, especially like pre-COVID. People were in the office every day having conversations. You could just walk into the product department, you know, walk across and speak to purchasing, whatever, and gain these insights across those full-time hours that an agency just never could. So that's a really big pro, I guess, to being in-house marketer. I guess a con is, yeah, again, maybe you just can't see the wood for the trees sometimes. You spin in too many plates, and you're too involved in the product to be able to take a step back and kind of critique. As you say, there's no marketers out there that are doing everything 100% well. I'll hold my hands up and say, I know there's areas that I can improve. And, you know, because you just can't improve on those. It's almost like a sore subject. So yeah, sometimes you might try not sweep stuff under the rug, but you know, there's sensitive areas, and then there's no way you can do everything on your own, really. So that's for me, I guess, in-house.
I guess it's obviously reversed there, isn't it? So the con for an agency is when you go into working in house, you don't know the product as well, but that's a relationship build where you've got to work with them to understand that product, and it goes a little bit back to if they're going to be compliant and give you the facts on the product, and some do, some don't. The pros, obviously, you've got a lot of in-depth knowledge on all the, you know, SEO, PPC, things that they in-house they might not have picked up on. I also think, and my experience on this is when you've worked on very similar services or products in the past, and you go in immediately, you kind of bypass that testing phase. You kind of know what's going to work, know what hasn't, so you can hit the ground really running. And I think that's a big plus to an agency. I know the expectations when you get an agency in is immediately within the first few weeks. Where's the results? Because that's what you feel your pain. So you have to be that sort of, I think, really on it. And therefore, as an agency, I guess you've got to position yourself to match the client. There's sort of, some have like very specialist services that only do like lawyers, solicitors, accountants, and some do different things. But yeah, I think that's, to me, the biggest pro of being an agency. Well, in my advice, I don't know what you think.
Because we're just to interject before we hand it back across to you, because we're trying to do like a Royal Rumble, I'm going to come in with the steel chair then and just say, if you worked across lots of similar businesses and you go in with a preset idea, that could sometimes be a bad thing, can't it? Because you'll go, this has worked across 4 different legal businesses, I'm going to implement it here. I'm not going to listen to the in-house marketers, and I'm going to do it,
Yeah, absolutely.
But I agree with that, because I think sorry, Rob. I was just going to say, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is chasing the tail of their competitors too hard. Like it's great if you know some of the things that your competitors are doing. Obviously, from an SEO perspective, you need to be conscious of that and be kind of playing the game. But there are other things when it comes to marketing where it literally is like, you need to like do your own thing, especially if your market is saturated. Otherwise, how the hell are you going to stand out? And I do think that is a problem for agencies. I think they kind of cookie cutter things.
Yeah, no.
Like you say, Jonny.
Yeah, I don't know. I totally get it. And I also think, adding into that, I think depending on the agency and how it's structured, but there's a lot of pressure from above to get results, and obviously from the client as well. So do you then just go for the golden nuggets, the quick wins, the things, and therefore, like you just said, bypass the extra things that might help in the future, because you're just concentrating on that'll help now immediately, that'll make us look good, my boss will be happy, my client will be happy, win-win. What's my next client? Because you've only got a finite amount of time you can work on the client, which is probably another con.
I guess I'll ask the next question. Emma, do you have anything to add to the pros and cons? Because obviously we've done both.
I think I guess it's maybe, I don't know if these are pros and cons, but I think there has to be a level of acceptance when you're in-house that you probably sometimes you can't do everything, and you do need to accept that external help. But I think this probably goes back to a bit more around like, how do you make sure you balance it out properly? But I think people don't do their due diligence when it comes to working with external people. So that's something that we can get into a little bit later. I think one of the biggest pros is that, like, if you're in-house and you ask for the help and you know the help that you need, and you are also asked about what help you need, because I think that goes back to the original point that founders find people for you, that you then have like the capability of doing so much more from a marketing perspective, but your job then becomes to kind of manage those relationships. And I think, again, that's potentially where some in-house marketers fall down, which is that they forget that there is a relationship. If you're in-house, you need to take some responsibility for the relationship with the agency or the consultant as well. I don't know what you think, Ruta.
I've seen agencies get burnt by that as well before, where I've met with either the account manager or whatever, and they're doing all the right stuff, and but where it really falls down is that mismanagement by the actual internal team, and then they obviously become the scapegoat. So, the internal team is changing their focus, their KPIs, their whatever every other week. So, of course, you're not going to then deliver what they want in 3 weeks when they look on results, because they've already changed their mind in what they wanted in the first place. And you're going to look bad, but it's nothing to do with you, right? But you can't say that either to the account, right? You can't be like, well, you keep changing the goalposts, because that's, it's not going to be a good conversation either. So yeah, I've seen agencies be unfortunately burnt by that, where I think they were really reasonable and knew what they were doing,
but just in the firing line. They always are, yeah. Like we said at the very beginning, yeah. That's a downside, isn't it?
Someone who's not internal is always an easy scapegoat, and that's okay. Maybe that's something we need to just live with. That's one of the functions that we serve as external people.
But do you think that's down to the agency? Sorry, I feel like I'm asking questions now. But do you feel it's down to the agency to
It's weird being
if
on the
you
other side of the mic, isn't it, Robbie?
I know it's difficult. To build that relationship, like if you have with the cause, or if an agency actually goes into the actual physical building and then you sat down together and you have that, then do you think that becomes then harder for internally to sort of blame the agency because they've almost
Yeah.
like integrated into the team?
Yeah, but that doesn't happen that much though, right?
No, it
When you think
doesn't.
about it,
Honestly,
like
got a big.
that's not the go-to strategy for agencies, and they absolutely should do that. But yeah, when you have bitty comms as well, I think that's when it happens. So when you're talking to one person here and then another person here, and it's all kind of like private information, then they all get to make their own opinions and their own conclusions about you, rather than everyone kind of being together at the same time and seeing the same stuff. So I think that's also when it can happen. So not necessarily just not integrating, but also keeping information siloed is not as good as you think it probably is.
But the number of agencies that have zero onboarding processes and zero offboarding processes is like monumental. I guess we are like really hot on this because we work in B2B SaaS. Everything is about onboarding and implementation. So setting out the ways that you work with your clients from the outset is like the key to being able to make sure that the system is set up for success. Why would you treat marketing or working with like an in-house team any differently? So like I can't believe the amount of people. I do it as a consultant. I go in on my own and I have like documentation which is about the ways that I work with people. Like I've even asked people like, how do you want me to communicate with you? Like these are very standard, simple questions. But the amount of agencies that don't do that stuff, I'm like, if you don't go in on the right like starting point, you've kind of screwed it from the outset, haven't you? Do you think? Can you win it back?
No, I think
Unless
that's
your
it.
results are really good, right? Then that kind of trumps everything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
I've not seen that approach really, to be honest, Emma. I've worked with a lot of external agencies, and it's either they come in and I've almost got to like project manage it and I kind of set the expectation, or they'll come in and say, look, we're going to send you a monthly report and it's going to look like X. Whereas I would like that. If someone came into me and said, how do you work? How can I communicate with you? And like, that should be the first step. Of course, it should be like, what is this relationship? Because that's the confusion. It's like you're thinking, why was this agency brought in? And they're thinking like, I don't know what agencies think. Probably that's the question for you. But it's like, it's almost like establishing those boundaries and kind of the way of working moving forwards is such an important step, and it's missed. At all the occasions I've seen it.
I literally have written on mine, do not WhatsApp me unless it's dog pictures. Like I love my clients, but I don't want to WhatsApp you unless
set your boundaries.
And I'm just being honest, man. Like, and if people do that back, then we're already having a really good conversation.
Yeah, I'd much prefer that. I think that's such a good way of doing it, and probably solves that initial first hurdle, really.
Speaking in terms of marketers being kind of ambushed, or things being brought to them like agencies or consultants, what should you, in your guys' experience, do as a founder if you're looking at your marketing team and you're like, okay, we need some stuff here, some stuff there, this is getting dropped? How do you navigate that instead of ambushing your team with the solution? How would you suggest that you do that process so everyone is bought in and happy and kind of setting off the relationship in the right way?
Yeah, I think it goes right down to that relationship building, doesn't it? It's because the part in my job I work in, we do marketplaces, and we go into a lot of companies and have digital marketing teams, so they know all the websites, all the things around there. But for instance, they don't know how to sell on Amazon very well, or eBay, or Frugo, or Boyle, or whichever. So that's a skill set they don't have. And when we're brought into there, it's very much supporting them and helping them on that. And we go in, and well, especially myself, I feel like, look, I'm not just going to go in and do the job. I'm going to show you and teach you, and then you can start to do that. And so that relationship for me is they will then gain the knowledge and the expertise of all the years myself and the team have done, and that'll help them. And then the MD, whichever, quite likes that because their bigger picture is we can then bring it in house. Of course, we don't, because then they don't have the resources because we're too busy doing this. But if they have that relationship that they believe or they're going to integrate. I think that seems to work very well. What I'm going to do, I don't know.
Yeah, I think two things for me really is like involve the marketer, like never kind of just be like, I'm bringing this person in to scrutinize you. Just be like, look, let's establish that we have this skills gap. How do we fill it? Okay, and it kind of leads on to the stage two is like actually plan for your scenario, because everything's different. It's not just like we need an agency. Maybe you might hire another in-house person, but if it's just a tiny skills gap that needs filling that could be filled by an agency, maybe it's going to cost less money. I think it's look at your individual situation and kind of plan what works for you. So there's no one size fits all solution really, and it's sitting down and speaking to the marketer and just saying, what do you need? Do you need an agency that's specifically focused on this? And then that's from the offset. It's like, yes, I need this. They're kind of gifting you then almost this help rather than bringing someone in to scrutinize you. And it's almost like looking at what's the long-term goal. I think what's the aim of all of this? Why are we bringing this agency in? It's such a key thing that you need to consider, because then there's no confusion. It's like this agency's coming to help. The end goal is that they're going to do this. And then when you sit down with, Emma comes in and says, this is how I communicate. What are your goals? How do you want it to work? You're not on the back foot. You already know exactly, and everyone's aligned then. So I think that's absolutely critical to having that good relationship from the offset. And I think that's, definitely something you need to consider.
So yeah, I was just going to say that I think one of the big challenges is where, say, for example, for a founder, they might be bringing in a consultant because they feel like marketing as a whole isn't working. Like generally as a sort of consultant, that tends to be the pattern. But they do absolutely need to speak to the marketer, like you say, Jonny. And I think they need to tie that back to, the business's sort of strategic aims, because I think that's the bit that's missing, is that all of a sudden this consultant or agency shows up. And it's a bit like, we need to fix marketing. And the marketer is completely frustrated. They're not getting the resource, the support that they need. They're kind of made to feel like the bad guy in all of this. And this consultant or agency has promised them the earth, moon and stars, because that's the other downside. And so I think, as a founder, if you feel like the marketing's not working holistically, and that's why you're bringing someone in, then you absolutely need to sit down with that marketer and you need to tie it back to business performance and have that conversation and have a very kind of like honest but kind conversation about why it's not working. I think the other thing that people need to do as if you're a founder or a CEO bringing someone in, is that you also need to explain how and why you found that person and why you're bringing them in, because that's often missing. It's like, here is such and such. Who is this person? Where have they come from? Why did you select them over and above someone else? Is it because they're mates with your mate? Because sometimes that's perfectly acceptable. We're not gonna shit on that word of mouth, but if you do need to give people enough information and transparency around it, I think. I don't know how you feel about that, Ruta. I know we're consultants. It kind of goes against everything that consultants stand for, but actually, I think you've got to do it differently.
Yeah. If you're ambushing, it's a lose-lose for everyone, right? The agency's going to lose because it's going to be a really tough relationship with the marketing team. The marketing team is going to lose faith in what you're doing and that you trust them. So it's a lose-lose for everyone. I think the other thing that springs to mind when you guys are talking is, let's say there is a bit of marketing that is being dropped and not looked after as well as it should be. Let's say it's, I don't know, PPC or something. Probably a bad example. But I think it's really worth asking the question why, and not just to sound like we know who. But it could be that the person has the skills to do it, but something else in their work takes up a load of time, so they can't do it. So is the solution to bring in a PPC agency, or is the solution to alleviate the person of the things they shouldn't be focusing their time on with other help, whether you take that off their plate completely or you have someone else do it, and then they can do that. So looking just, I feel like, at the like specific area of marketing is kind of looking at like the symptoms, not the underlying reason for why that thing isn't happening. So having that conversation first and being able to, figure out what solution is actually best is super important before you swoop and poop with some sort of an agency consultant.
And I think what runs really nicely what you're just saying, Ruta, as I was thinking there, is when managers or owners of companies suddenly look at the next shiny thing. Right, we need to be on TikTok Shop. Can you do it? Well, no. Right, we need an agency to do that. We need an agency to sell this to America. This thing of this panic, and it's like you go back to why? Is that part of the strategy, or is it just something? Do you actually need these people? Yeah, and that probably can get people's backs up quite a lot as well.
Can I do an analogy? Like, my thing is that I love analogies. So like, it's like, imagine the in-house marketers working on a painting and they've got so far, right? And then like the CEO starts like scribbling their own thing up here, and then an agency comes in and starts scribbling their own thing up here. Like, that would be horrible for me. Whereas if we all took a step back and we're like, okay, this is really good, but you know, you need to, let's say it's a horse, you need to draw the mane. I could start drawing this, and you know, many hands made. It's a bad example because I wouldn't want ever 3 people working on a
On your
on a
painting.
painting. But like, it's almost like, you know, imagine someone coming up and doodling on your painting
Just
without
step back and
consulting
look at the
you.
bigger
Or
picture.
like,
all the classical masterpieces are painted by many artists, so you know what, it can work.
Is there, so on the flip side of all of the pros and cons and a bit of negativity sprinkled in, is there ever a scenario where an internal or external marketer is actually better? Have you seen that work in any, you know, like real life context?
as in like as a standalone solution, completely get rid of in-house to replace with external, or just
Well, I
the
guess it
people
depends.
themselves.
Yeah, I guess it could be either or, like where you've seen it actually been better.
Maybe if we can think about some of the classical agency
Specialisms.
times, yeah, specialisms like PPC, for
Yeah.
example, and think about if it was better to actually have an internal marketer, because I can think of stuff like that for sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think obviously, like, you know, we've spoke at the beginning. I've worked with Rob. Like, I've seen some pretty trash in-house marketers. I've also seen some really terrible agencies. So I think some of it does come back to the people.
He's relentless. He's just totally relentless.
Some of it does come back to the people you're working with. You know, you've got bad agency, you've got bad in-house people. You know, and as you say, if that conversation is marketing's not performing, we're bringing this person in to help. 100%. If you get the right agency, they can fix that problem. You know, so it definitely goes both ways. That there's bad in-house people, there's bad external marketers. But to pick up on the PPC thing, and I'll like an in-house person, for instance, I love saying this in marketing, it depends. And I think a lot of it depends on like the industry. So if you're in a really technical industry, like I'm in cybersecurity, and you know, when I joined, there was a PPC agency which then got displaced. They were great. They actually dissolved, so it wasn't anything to do with me. But they were following threads that you necessarily they're so complex topic, cybersecurity, that you just couldn't. I still don't understand it, and I've been in the company 5 years now, and they'll be following threads that just kind of don't make sense. There's a lot of wasted budget, and it's kind of it's almost then my job to explain it, and it doesn't ever take that time away because I'm then going in and saying, no, don't do this, and you end up kind of managing it yourself anyway. So it really depends on the person, the agency, the you know, the industry. Whatever. Yeah. So for me,
just to quickly add to that as well, I think with PPC, if you require a high pace of change, aka you want to run experiments and you want to be constantly tweaking stuff, in-house, at least in my experience, is a much better place to do that.
Yeah, agencies can't, you know, they've got what am I trying to think, they've got an SLA around the time. Yeah, their SLA is not going to allow for you to change something that quickly.
Neither how many hours they're working for you every month, given your spend. Like, it never adds up to that.
But on the flip, as I said, I've worked with, you know, across my whole 10 years now, like 10 plus years of marketing, there's an agency that I've continuously worked with because we built that relationship and I believe in their people. And, you know, it really does just depend, I guess. So that's my answer, is a bit of a
I think
cop-out, but
one of the things there, but I think the perception someone as in-house is when you work as an agency on things for them, that you're there full time, that all you're doing is working for them. You have no other clients, and that's just it. And you're available. I know not on some WhatsApp, Emma, but you're available like all the time. It's almost like you're just sat there waiting for them to call you and to deal with things. And that, yeah, I don't know if that's gone off tangent there, but it just jumped into my head.
The relationship, the management of the expectations on the relationship needs to be managed on the agency side as well, right? Like, everybody knows they might have an SLA, but you've also got like there are agencies that have no processes for handling that, so they don't manage the expectations of the clients in the first place. So then there is that thing on the agency side where it's like, well, I'm not always available to you, but do the agency do a good enough job of setting that up from the outset so that people understand? Probably not.
I think that, yeah, and that completely goes back to the last question of where we're saying you need to look at what you're trying to achieve. I think there's definitely scenarios where internal marketers are the answer, and maybe they just need upskilling, or you could hire another internal marketer or a slightly different one. Or there's times where an agency could just be the full solution. Maybe you're a startup and you're not quite ready to invest in marketing, or there's tons of scenarios where either will definitely work, I think. So there's no kind of right answer, and it's almost just going back a step and doing that kind of strategy piece at the start and thinking, why do we need it? What solutions is it going to solve? And then kind of trying out which one works for you, really. So
yeah. And the resource bit, isn't it? It's like, how much resource do you actually need of this one specific thing? So like you were saying, Ruta, with the PPC example, if you need constant optimization because you're running experiments, yeah, in-house is probably going to be better for you. But say, for example, a really good example for me is copywriters. I love an external copywriter who works in like a niche field, so that I know that they understand the broader subject. So like, but again, that I think as a marketer, if you are in-house, or you're the founder, there isn't, and I will keep banging on about this till I die probably, but you need to do your due diligence, because just because someone's flashy and they were top of the Google search does not mean they're the right person. But if you dig under the surface and you actually find out, well, actually this person specializes in cybersecurity and they write copy for cybersecurity and that is their bread and butter and they do that day in, day out, actually, Jonny, that might be someone you want to work with. But if they're just a flashy agency who are like, but we have loads of clients and it's very impressive, like, yeah, I'm not shitting on all the big ones. Some of the big ones do know what they're doing, but I just think you should do your homework when you're hiring in, well, externally and internally, right?
yeah, you might have like 3 rounds of interviews with an internal person, whereas like you say, you might just click the top Google and go, this is the person, because they got 300 likes on their last LinkedIn post. So yeah, 100%.
So how can in-house and external marketers work together better?
They can't. It's cats and dogs.
It's possible. Never going to happen.
Don't bother.
Sacrifice each other on the altar.
Yeah, exactly. Throw each other under the bus. Like, there's just a war, and we'll see who comes out on top.
I mean, one of the points is integrate, right? That's what we all kind of agreed on. Try to integrate as much as you can between the two teams or two individuals.
Manage expectations, manage, the clients, expectations. That's another thing that you mentioned, Emma, and it's a brilliant point. Yeah, just this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to achieve it, and this is the timeline. But don't expect, that's another thing. Yeah, that's really important.
It's all just communicate. Everything we've been discussing, it's kind of like making sure that you're getting the appropriate resource and the correct resource from the offset, communicating that to everyone, making sure everyone's on the same page. And like you said, Emma, is like getting together and establishing that relationship at the start and just being on the same team. I know it's really hard sometimes, especially when, you're not, maybe one of your plates isn't spinning as fast as the rest, and they are there to help at the end of the day, an external agency. And an in-house person, they have knowledge, and if their metrics are going to go up, then they should want to help you as well. So I think it's just establishing that at the very beginning, and then you build for success, basically.
For me, a very not technical one, a practical one is aligning on tech. So I find that a lot of agencies in the SEO and PPC world want to report off of Google Analytics, and I prefer if they report off of HubSpot. So if you have those conversations up front, you're not then going to a review and they're like, oh yeah, this and this happened and like this many conversions on Google Analytics, and I'm like, yeah, but my numbers are different because I can actually see the human beings that converted in HubSpot because I've got their names and emails. So aligning on those things, I think, is like a small point, but it just takes away that friction immediately, because I hate having that conversation personally. I find it really boring and frustrating.
That's a brilliant point, and I've come across that where you've presented your figures and everything, and then they've gone, no, doesn't match what we've got here. And then it's like crickets and the tumbleweed flying past you, thinking, well, where do you get yours from then? Got it from the back.
Or even,
so
sometimes as an in-house marketer, you might not want to present the same level of data as an agency would. So, maybe like just talk about, I don't maybe want to show all of this, because if I show, like, I don't know, all the keywords people are finding us for or something, people are going to start going, oh, let's do a blog post on that, or let's do a video on that. And you don't want, people to get involved in that certain level. So I think it's 100% reporting and aligning yourselves on that is really important.
Can I just ask something on this? It's just sprung to mind. No, I know not that. So, but we talked about in-house sort of holding things back and not allowing agencies to sort of know because of protection. Do you feel, or I'm not saying you've ever done this, but agencies can do the same where they just drip feed certain information because then it keeps the power with them and it keeps basically them, I suppose, on the books employed in that retainer?
If they're a shit agency, they do it.
I can't think of a time when it's actually happened to me. If anything, they over-report.
I've had experiences with terrible agencies that have essentially, like they're inherited agencies that you come in, you go work somewhere in-house and they're here and you're like, huh? And they've totally hoodwinked your CEO and you're like, this is insane. And also then you are in a difficult position because as the in-house person, even though you're new, like, let's be honest, someone external tends to have the ear of someone into like the CEO in an easier way because they're external and they're viewed as an expert. So there's a whole dynamic issue there. But yeah, where they've basically, because they've hoodwinked the founder, the kind of data that they're reporting back on is just not acceptable. It's not actual performance data, it's vanity metrics, which at certain stages of organizations are fine. But I would say as the in-house marketer, one of the key things I have done to help either get rid of crappy agencies or to help get everyone aligned is to go, this is how I report. This is how, like you were sort of saying, Ruta, this is how I want you to report. So this is when I report to SLT. So, and this is my template and this is the information I want, and set that out from the outset. Like, then nobody needs to be like figuring out what they should and shouldn't report to you. But you've got to have that stuff in place.
Yeah, I've definitely had that where like they'll come in and they'll speak to you and they'll dazzle them with these vanity metrics and be like, oh, but we got like 12,000 impressions, and it's kind of like, okay, great, but you didn't get any leads through. Like,
I can get 12,000 impressions tomorrow. Just let me on the account. Like, it's not hard. You just pay for them.
Blog post.
Yeah.
Just be like, Russell Crowe did what with an aubergine?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? And you just get told, oh, look, I've tripled organic traffic. Like, amazing.
I love that.
So it's keeping it relevant, and again, that goes back to like being on the same page and looking at everything we just talked about. So, sorry, Ruta.
No. I'm not the guest. One of the things that I also have definitely felt as myself and also seen is that the internal marketer tends to be the skeptic and maybe the slightly more negative out of the grouping. So I think that's why often with founders, when a marketing agency or whatever agency dazzles them, and then the marketing person in-house comes in and they're like, yeah, that's not gonna happen, like that's not gonna work, they're kind of seen as like that negative like naysayer, because like for the founder, this is their baby, this is their dream, they want to do as well as they can. So maybe as well to help those relationships as the marketer, try to kind of hold back that really strong criticism and just be educational and explain, or dig into kind of the details of the agency and try to do it through that path rather than just being like, yeah, nah, that's not going to work. I know I'm that person and I need to control my face and what I say when those things happen, but it's usually not what someone wants to hear, and people love hearing what they want to hear. So you have to find a better way to get to that conclusion and get them to that conclusion.
Yeah, two things on that. So one, like as obviously an in-house marketer, agencies I've sometimes seen, they'll come in and they'll have like a PPC calculator or something where they just put a bunch of stats in, press go, and it gives this like number that you just know as an in-house marketer is not achievable and realistic. So being a naysayer, like you're right, you've got to do it in the right way, but it all just comes back to being aligned. I think I've got one final thing for like how in-house and agencies can like work well together. And I think that's almost like planning for the worst case scenario and planning for when things go wrong. and not just chucking each other under the bus, I guess, and just saying, I don't know, maybe just putting that middle layer in where the reports come to you, you have a bit of a discussion, and then it gets fed back or something. So you can be like, how do we sort of communicate that maybe this isn't working or this isn't working, rather than just being like, oh, they tried this, it didn't work, let's bin them off kind of thing. So I think that would be like an important step to add.
I think also on the agency side, and this is something, again, maybe it's slightly easier because we're consultants, but I also think, like, don't sell people shit they don't need. Like, that's like a fundamental principle of like what you should do. Like, if you want to grow your business, but you're honest about how you do business, even that might turn some people off because you're not all glitz and glamour and this is gonna, quick wins. But realistically, in the long term, you will retain the clients that you do have because you're being honest about the work and the delivery time and those expectations. So you will inevitably start to attract the clients that align to the way that you do work. And I'm sure there have been people who have not worked with me because I'm very honest and upfront about, how long things take to do and all of those kind of things. But the clients that I do have like me, they keep coming back because I tell them the truth.
Well, yeah, but isn't that what you want to do though? Isn't that you want to, if they're not aligned with you and they want to, no, we can do this, Emma, you're just not gonna, you're not gonna want to work with them. And if also you've got into, and I've had this in the past where you bought, so whoever sold it in, I don't know, promised the earth and everything, and then you've come in and then you've got to pick up the pieces, and you've got this massive expectation which you can never meet, and that's just, you're just on the back foot to start with, and then it's just the relationship's just you don't want to work for them because you just know that every time you come to reporting, it's just your forecast is just way higher than you're ever going to achieve, and it's just becomes really difficult.
Yeah, and that brought something else to mind. So at least for me, and I think Emma as well, we say no a lot to both clients, but to things that are unreasonable, because essentially we want for you to know what the reality is, and we want your business to be successful, but that's not through lying about what's possible, right? So one thing that you can do as an internal marketer is potentially use your agency or your consultant to be the person that says, no, that's in our experience, not how it works, and actually use them for that reason, so that you're not the naysayer. They are the ones that are going to be responsible and can make a difference because they've got that kind of wider experience that maybe your CEO might not think that you have, or whatever it might be. I think we had a wonderful episode. Thank you so much to both of you. It's so interesting. I when I was an in-house person, I never thought I'd work for an agency, and I don't. I work as a consultant now, but you kind of have ended up being on both sides of it. So yeah. It's interesting to reminisce and think about things. So yeah, thank you so much, Rob and Jonny, for joining us. It was a great episode. We hope that you also, I think you both have joined blameoutmarketing.com from what I remember. So wonderful. So if anyone that's listening wants to go talk to Rob and Jonny on blameoutmarketing.com, you can, and you can ask them any questions about agency or in-house life that you might have. I think that pretty much wraps it up. So yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.